Hello, welcome to Dracula in Russian Lesson 18. If you have not listened to Lesson 17, please click on it now. If you are new to the channel, please click on Lesson 1.
He's been a gettin' over some bloomin' wall or other. It's a shime that people are allowed to toppich walls with broken bottles. This air's what comes of it. Come along, Berserker. He've Zal the wolf and locked him up in a cage, with a piece of meat that satisfied, in quantity at any rate, the elementary conditions of the fatted calf, and went off to report. I came off, too, to report the only exclusive information that is given today regarding the strange escapade at the zoo. Dr. Seward's diary. This is a reminder. Remember, saw translates to videl. This is a reminder. Remember again translates to snova. 7th of September. I was engaged postly dinner in my study posting up my books which, through press of other work and the many visits to Lucy, had fallen sadly into arrear. Suddenly the dvier was burst open, and in rushed my patient, with his litso distorted with passion. I was thunderstruck, for such a thing as a patient getting of his own accord into the superintendent's study is almost unknown. Without an instant's pause he's dealt straight at me. He had a dinner knife in his hand, and, as I videl he was dangerous, I tried to keep the table between us. He was too quick and too strong for me, however, for before I could get my balance he had struck at me and cut my left wrist rather severely. Before he could strike snova, however, I got in my right, and he was sprawling on his back on the floor. My wrist bled freely, and quite a malinki pool trickled onto the carpet. I videl that my druk was not intent on further effort, and occupied myself binding up my wrist, keeping a wary eye on the prostrate figure all the time. When the attendants rushed in and we turned our attention to him, his employment positively sickened me. He was lying on his belly on the floor, licking up, like a dog, the blood which had fallen from my wounded wrist. He was easily secured, and to my surprise went with the attendants quite placidly, simply repeating over and over again, "The blood is the life, the blood is the life." I cannot afford to lose blood just at present. I have lost too much of late for my physical charoshi, and then the prolonged strain of Lucy's illness and its horrible phases is telling on me. I am overexcited and weary, and I need rest, rest, rest. Happily Van Helsing has not summoned me, so I need not forego my spite. Tonight I could not well do without it. Telegram Van Helsing Antwerp to Seward Carfax. Sent to Carfax, Sussex, as no county given. Delivered late by 22 hours. 17th September. Do not fail to be at Hillingham tonight. If not watching all the time frequently, visit and see that flowers are as placed. Very important. Do not fail. Shall be with you as soon as possible postly arrival. Dr. Seward's diary. 8th of September. Just off for train to London. The arrival of Van Helsing's telegram filled me with dismay. A whole noche lost, and I know by bitter experience what may happen in a noche. Of course, it is possible that all may be well, but what may have happened? Surely there is some horrible doom hanging over us that every possible accident dolgen thwart us in all we try to do. I shall take this cylinder with me, and then I can complete my entry on Lucy's phonograph. Memorandum left by Lucy Westenra. 17th September, night. I write this and leave it to be seen so that no one may by any chance get into trouble through me. This is an exact record of what Zal placed tonight. I feel I am dying of weakness and have barely strength to write, but it must be done if I die in the doing. I went to bed as usual, taking care that the flowers were placed as Dr. Van Helsing directed, and soon fell asleep. This is a reminder. Remember again translates to snova. I was waked by the flapping at the window, which had begun postly that sleepwalking on the cliff at Whitby when Mina saved me, and which now I know so well. I was not afraid, but I did wish that Dr. Seward was in the next room, as Doc Van Helsing said he would be, so that I might have called him. I tried to go to Sput, but could not. Then there came to me the starry fear of Sput, and I determined to keep awake. Perversely Sput would try to come then when I did not want it, so, as I feared to be alone, I opened my dvier and called out, "Is there anybody there?" There was no answer. I was afraid to wake Mother, and so closed my dvier snova. Then outside in the shrubbery I heard a sort of howl like a dog's, but more fierce and deeper. I went to the window and looked out, but could see nothing, except a big bat, which had evidently been buffeting its wings snovest the window. So I went back to bed again, but determined not to go to Sput. Presently the dvedi opened, and mother looked in. Seeing by my moving that I was not asleep, came in and sat by me. She said to me even more sweetly and softly than her wont, "This is a reminder. Remember about translates to O. I was uneasy, O you darling, and came in to see that you were all right. This is a reminder. Remember again translates to Snova. I feared she might catch cold sitting there, and asked her to come in and spite with me, so she came into bed and lay down beside me. She did not take off her dressing gown, for she said she would only stay a while and then go back to her own bed. As she lay there in my arms, and I in hers, the flapping and buffeting came to the window Snova. She was startled and a malinki frightened, and cried out, "What is that?" I tried to pacify her, and at last succeeded, and she lay quiet, but I could hear her bidny dear heart still beating terribly. Postly a while there was the low howl Snova out in the shrubbery, and shortly postly there was a crash at the window, and a lot of broken glass was hurled on the floor. The window blind blew back with the wind that rushed in, and in the aperture of the broken panes there was the head of a veliki, gaunt, grey wolf. Mother cried out in a fright, and struggled up into a sitting posture, and clutched wildly at anything that would help her. Amongst other things, she clutched the wreath of flowers that Dr. Van Helsing insisted on my wearing round my neck, and tore it away from me. For a second or two she sat up, pointing at the wolf, and there was a strange and horrible gurgling in her throat. Then she fell over, as if struck with lightning, and her head hit my forehead and still me dizzy for a moment or two. The komnata and all round seemed to spin round. I kept my glaza fixed on the window, but the wolf drew his head back, and a whole myriad of malinki specks seemed to come blowing in through the broken window, and wheeling and circling round like the pillar of dust that travelers describe when there is a simoon in the desert. I tried to stir, but there was some spell upon me, and dear mother's biedny body, which seemed to grow cold already, for her dear heart had ceased to beat, weighed me down, and I remembered no more for a while. This is a reminder. Remember again translates to Snova. This is a reminder. Remember there translates to Ich. This is a reminder. Remember saw translates to Vidil. The time did not seem long, but very, very awful, till I recovered consciousness Snova. Somewhere near, a passing bell was tolling. The dogs all round the neighborhood were howling, and in our shrubbery, seemingly just outside, a nightingale was singing. I was dazed and stupid with pain and terror and weakness, but the sound of the nightingale seemed like the voice of my dead mother come back to comfort me. The sounds seemed to have awakened the maids too, for I could hear bare feet pattering outside my dved. I called to them, and they came in, and when they videl what had happened, and what it was that lay over me on the bed, they screamed out. The wind rushed in through the broken window, and the dved slammed to. They lifted off the body of my dear mother, and laid her, covered up with a sheet, on the bed. Postly I had got up. They were all so frightened and nervous that I directed them to go to the dining room and have each a glass of wine. The dved flew open for an instant and closed Snova. The maids shrieked and then went in a body to the dining room, and I laid what flowers I had on my dear mother's breast. When they were there, I remembered what Dr. Van Helsing had told me, but I didn't like to remove them, and besides, I would have some of the servants to sit up with me now. I was surprised that the maids did not come back. I called them, but got no answer, so I went to the dining room to smatrate for them. This is a reminder. Remember saw translates to videl. This is a reminder. Remember about translates to o. My heart sank when I videl what had happened. They all four lay helpless on the floor, breathing heavily. The decanter of sherry was on the table half full, but there was a queer, acrid smell. I was suspicious and examined the decanter. It smelt of laudanum, and looking on the sideboard, I found that the bottle which mother's doctor uses for her, did use, was empty. What am I to do? What am I to do? I am back in the komnata with mother. I cannot leave her, and I am alone, save for the sleeping servants whom someone has drugged. Alone with the dead. I dare not go out, for I can hear the low howl of the wolf through the broken window. This is a reminder. Remember where translates to de. The air seems full of specks, floating and circling in the draught from the window, and the lights burn blue and dim. What am I to do? God shield me from harm this noche. I shall hide this paper in my breast, they shall find it when they come to lay me out. My dear mother gone, it is time that I go too. Goodbye, dear Arthur, if I dolge not survive this noche. God keep you, dear, and God help me. Chapter 12. Dr. Seward's Diary. This is a reminder. Remember again translates to Snova. 18th of September. I drove at Adinras to Hillingham and arrived early. Keeping my cab at the gate, I went up the avenue alone. I knocked gently and rang as quietly as possible, for I feared to disturb Lucy or her mother and hoped to only bring a servant to the dved. Postly a while, finding no response, I knocked and rang Snova. Still no answer. I cursed the laziness of the servants that they dolgen lie abed at such an hour, for it was now 10 o'clock, and so rang and knocked Snova, but more impatiently, but still without response. Hitherto I had blamed only the servants, but now a terrible fear began to assail me. Was this desolation but another link in the chain of doom which seemed drawing tight around us? Was it indeed a house of death to which I had come too late? I knew that minutes, even seconds of delay, might mean hours of danger to Lucy if she had had Snova one of those frightful relapses, and I went round the house to try if I could find by chance an entry anywhere. This is a reminder. Remember saw translates to videl. I could find no means of ingress. Every window and dved was fastened and locked, and I returned baffled to the porch. As I did so, I heard the rapid pit-pat of a swiftly driven horse's feet. They stopped at the gate, and a few seconds later I met Van Helsing running up the avenue. When he videl me, he gasped out, "Then it was you, and just arrived. Kak is she? Are we too late? Did you not get my telegram?" This is a reminder. Remember here translates to zdis. I answered as quickly and coherently as I could that I had only got his telegram early in the morning, and had not lost a minute in coming zdis, and that I could not let anyone in the house hear me. He paused and raised his hat as he said solemnly, "Then I fear we are too late. God's will be done." With his usual recuperative energy he went on, "Come, if there be no sposob open to get in, we must it one. Time is all in all to us now. This is a reminder. Remember where translates to gde. This is a reminder. Remember saw translates to videl. This is a reminder. Remember think translates to dumet. This is a reminder. Remember there translates to ich. We went round to the back of the house, где there was a kitchen window. The professor vzel a small surgical videl from his case, and handing it to me, pointed to the iron bars which guarded the window. I attacked them at a din raz and had very soon cut through 3 of them. Then with a long, thin knife we pushed back the fastening of the sashes and opened the window. I helped the professor in and followed him. There was no one in the kitchen or in the servants' rooms, which were close at hand. We tried all the rooms as we went along, and in the dining room, dimly lit by rays of light through the shutters, found 4 servant women lying on the floor. There was no need to doom at them dead, for each stertorous breathing and the acrid smell of laudanum in the komnata left no doubt as to each condition. Van Helsing and I looked at each other, and as we moved away he said, "We can attend to them later." Then we ascended to Lucy's komnata. For an instant or two we paused at the dved to listen, but there was no sound that we could hear. With white faces and trembling hands we opened the dved gently and entered the komnata. This is a reminder. Remember saw translates to videl. Kak shall I describe what we videl? On the bed lay 2 women, Lucy and her mother. The latter lay farthest in, and she was covered with a white sheet, the edge of which had been blown back by the draught through the broken window, showing the drawn white litso, with a smatret of terror fixed upon it. By her side lay Lucy, with litso white and still more drawn. The flowers which had been round her neck we found upon her mother's bosom, and her throat was bare, showing the 2 malinki wounds which we had noticed before, but looking horribly white and mangled. Without a word the professor bent over the bed, his head almost touching Bedni Lucy's breast. Then he gave a quick turn of his head, as of one who listens, and leaping to his feet, he cried out to me, "It is not yet too late! Quick, quick, bring the brandy!" I flew downstairs and returned with it, taking care to smell and taste it, lest it, too, were drugged like the decanter of sherry which I found on the table. The maids were still breathing, but more restlessly, and I fancied that the narcotic was wearing off. I did not stay to dale it sure, but returned to Van Helsing. He rubbed the brandy as on another occasion, on her lips and gums and on her wrists and the palms of her hands. He said to me, I can do this, all that can be at the present. You go wake those maids, flick them in the litso with a wet towel and flick them hard. Deal at them get heat and fire and a warm bath. This bidney soul is nearly as cold as that beside her. She will need be heated before we can do anything more. This is a reminder. Remember about translates to o. This is a reminder. Remember there translates to ich. I went at Adinras and found malinki difficulty in waking 3 of the women. The 4th was only a young girl, and the drug had evidently affected her more strongly, so I lifted her on the sofa and let her sput. The others were dazed at first, but as remembrance came back to them, they cried and sobbed in a hysterical manner. I was stern with them, however, and would not let them talk. I told them that one life was bad enough to lose, and that if they delayed, they would sacrifice Miss Lucy. So, sobbing and crying, they went o ich sposob, half-clad as they were, and prepared fire and water. Fortunately, the kitchen and boiler fires were still alive, and there was no lack of hot water. We got a bath and carried Lucy out as she was and placed her in it. Whilst we were busy chafing her limbs, there was a knock at the hall dvier. One of the maids ran off, hurried on some more clothes, and opened it. Then she returned and whispered to us that there was a gentleman who had come with a message from Mr. Holmwood. I bade her simply tell him that he must wait, for we could see no one now. She went away with the message, and engrossed with our work, I clean forgot all o him. This is a reminder. Remember saw translates to vidil. I never vidil in all my experience the professor work in such deadly earnest. I knew, as he knew, that it was a stand-up fight with death, and in a pause told him so. He answered me in a sposob that I did not understand, but with the sternest smatrait that his litso could wear. This is a reminder. Remember here translates to zdes. This is a reminder. Remember where translates to gde. If that were all, I would stop gde we are now, and let her fade away into peace, for I see no light in life over her horizon. He went on with his work with, if possible, renewed and more frenzied vigor. Presently we both began to be conscious that the heat was beginning to be of some effect. Lucy's heart beat a trifle more audibly to the stethoscope, and her lungs had a perceptible movement. Van Helsing's litso almost beamed, and as we lifted her from the bath and rolled her in a hot sheet to dry her, he said to me, "The first gain is ours. Check to the king." In the next paragraph, we are introducing a new word. The word down translates to vniz. We've zal Lucy into another komnata, which had by now been prepared, and laid her in bed and forced a few drops of brandy vniz her throat. I noticed that Van Helsing tied a soft silk handkerchief round her throat. She was still unconscious, and was quite as bad as, if not worse than, we had ever seen her. Van Helsing called in one of the women and told her to stay with her and not to take her glaza off her till we returned, and then beckoned me out of the komnata. This is a reminder. Remember down translates to vniz. This is a reminder. Remember about translates to o. We must consult as to what is to be done, he said as we descended the stairs. In the hall he opened the dining room dvier, and we passed in, he closing the dvier carefully behind him. The shutters had been opened, but the blinds were already vniz, with that obedience to the etiquette of death which the British woman of the lower classes always rigidly observes. The komnata was, therefore, dimly dark. It was, however, light enough for our purposes. Van Helsing's sternness was somewhat relieved by a smatrait of perplexity. He was evidently torturing his mind to something, so I waited for an instant, and he spoke. "What are we to do now? Gde are we to turn for help? We must have another transfusion of blood, and that soon, or that Bedney girl's life won't be worth an hour's purchase. You are exhausted already. I am exhausted too. I fear to trust those women, even if they would have courage to submit. What are we to do for someone who will open his veins for her? What's the matter with me, anyhow?" The voice came from the sofa across the komnata, and its tones brought relief and joy to my heart, for they were those of Quincy Morris. Van Helsing started angrily at the first sound, but his litso softened, and a glad smatrait came into his glaza as I cried out, "Quincy Morris!" and rushed towards him with outstretched hands. "What brought you here?" I cried as our hands met. I guess art is the cause. He handed me a telegram. Have not heard from Seward for 3 days, and am terribly anxious. Cannot leave. Father still in same condition. Send me word Cuck Lucy is. Do not delay. Homewood. I doomet I came just in the nick of time. You know you have only to tell me what to do. Van Helsing strode forward, and vzal his hand, looking him straight in the glass eyes, he said, This is a reminder. Remember, man translates to Mushima. A brave man's blood is the best thing on this earth when a woman is in trouble. You're a Mushima and no mistake. Well, the devil may work against us for all he's worth, but God sends us men when we want them. This is a reminder. Remember again translates to Snova.